Right after we buried my best friend's husband in a quiet cemetery outside Springfield, Illinois, I came home expecting silence, maybe grief, maybe even comfort. Instead, I walked into my kitchen and saw my own husband slam divorce papers down on the table, like I was already dead to him. I still remember the sound of it, paper hitting wood, clean, final, no hesitation. For a second, I just stood there with my coat still on, funeral bracelet still on my wrist, not even sure I was breathing right. My name is Laura Bennett. I'm 42 years old, and until that day, I thought I understood my marriage. The house was too quiet when I came in. That's the thing you notice first. When something is wrong in your life, you don't hear anything except your own footsteps. Daniel was already sitting at the kitchen table like he had been waiting for me. No TV on, no phone in his hand, just that stack of papers in front of him. "I need you to sign these," he said, calm, as if he was asking me to pick up milk on the way home. I looked at him and laughed once, but it came out wrong. "Daniel, I just came back from a funeral." He didn't even blink, I know. That's when I noticed the second thing that didn't feel right. He wasn't emotional, not guilty, not nervous, just decided. I set my purse down slowly, like moving too fast might break whatever reality I was standing in. "Whose funeral do you think I just came from?" I asked. He leaned back in his chair, rubbed his thumb along the edge of the table. "Mark Ellison's." My stomach tightened. Mark wasn't just my best friend's husband. He was part of our lives for years, cookouts, birthdays, neighborhood stuff in Springfield where everybody knows everybody's business, whether you want them to or not. Daniel tapped the papers. "It's time, Laura." Time for what I asked, even though I already felt something cold building in my chest. He looked at me like I was slow, like I had missed a meeting I was supposed to attend. "I'm going to marry Rebecca." That name hit harder than anything else he could have said. Rebecca, my best friend, the same woman I had just hugged in a cemetery while she cried so hard she couldn't stand straight. I actually stepped back. "That's not funny." "It's not a joke," he said. Then he slid the papers closer. Divorce, my name already printed, his already signed. I remember the way my hands started to shake, not dramatically, just slightly. Like my body understood something my brain refused to accept. "You've been planning this?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. That pause told me everything. Outside, a truck passed down our street. Normal life. People getting groceries, picking up kids going to work. Inside my kitchen, my marriage was being folded up and thrown away like junk mail. "I'm not discussing it," Daniel finally said. "Just sign it." I looked at him for a long time. I don't know what he expected, crying, screaming, begging. Maybe that would have made it easier for him. But something in me just shut down. "All right," I said. That stopped him for half a second, like he expected resistance and didn't get it. I pulled the chair out and sat down across from him. My hands were steady now, which scared me more than if they were shaking. I picked up the pen he had already placed there. "You're really doing this?" I asked one last time. "Yes." I signed my name. No dramatic speech, no thrown pen, just ink on paper. When I pushed it back toward him, he looked almost annoyed that it had gone so smoothly. "You're not even going to ask why?" he said. I stood up, grabbed my purse again. "I think you already told me." And I walked out of the kitchen. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in our guest room with the door closed, listening to the house settle. Daniel didn't come looking for me. That told me something too. Around 2 a.m., I went downstairs for water. The kitchen light was still off, but the street light coming through the window lit up the table just enough. The papers were still there. And next to them, something I hadn't noticed before, a folded funeral program from earlier that day. Mark Ellison's name printed in black ink. Memorial service held at St. Luke's Church. Burial at Oak Ridge Cemetery. But what caught my eye wasn't the program itself. It was the corner underneath it. A business card, slightly bent, funeral director's contact, and something else scribbled in pen on the back. A law firm name I didn't recognize. But Daniel had circled it. Twice. I stood there longer than I should have, just staring at it, feeling that strange shift inside you when you realize something isn't just betrayal. It's connected to something bigger you haven't seen yet. From upstairs, I heard the floor creak, Daniel moving around like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just rewritten my entire life over dinner. I folded the program back carefully and left it exactly where it was. But I didn't go back to bed. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table alone in the same chair where my marriage had just ended, and I started thinking about Rebecca and Mark and what exactly Daniel had already set in motion before I even walked through that front door. Because something about all of this didn't feel like impulse. It felt planned. And that scared me more than the divorce papers ever could. The first thing people always want to know after something like this is how you reacted. Did you scream? Did you confront him? Did you throw his clothes on the lawn? I moved out quietly. 3 days after Daniel handed me those divorce papers, I rented a small one-bedroom apartment off Veterans Parkway in Springfield. Nothing fancy. Second floor, thin walls, a heater that clicked too loud at night. But it was mine, and for the first time in years I could breathe without feeling watched. I told people it was temporary. That was easier than explaining the truth. Daniel, meanwhile, wasted no time. By the end of the first week, he had already been seen with Rebecca at the grocery store on West Washington Street. By the second week, they were eating dinner together at a restaurant near the Capitol. And by the third week, he was practically living at her house. Word travels fast in a city like Springfield, especially when it's messy. I didn't go looking for information at first. I told myself I didn't care. But grief doesn't always look like sadness. Sometimes it looks like curiosity you can't shut off. And I started noticing things. Rebecca stopped answering calls from mutual friends. She used to text me every other day. Suddenly nothing, just silence. Daniel, on the other hand, became almost performative about it. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was stepping into it like he wanted people to see. One afternoon I ran into my neighbor Carla outside the apartment mailboxes. She lowered her voice before I even asked anything. "I saw your husband," she said carefully. "Ex-husband," I corrected automatically. She nodded. "Right. Well, I saw him with Rebecca at Hy-Vee. They looked comfortable." That word stuck with me. Comfortable, like they had always belonged together. That night I sat at my small kitchen counter eating a frozen dinner I barely tasted, staring at my phone. I told myself I wouldn't check anything. Then I did. Rebecca's social media had changed. It used to be full of flowers, family photos, her husband Mark at cookouts, birthdays, all the normal suburban stuff. Now it was different, cleaner, curated, a few vague posts about new beginnings and life moving forward. No mention of Mark at all. That bothered me more than I expected. Because Mark had only been gone a few weeks. I started digging the way you pretend you're not digging. Casual searches, old emails, shared contacts, nothing obvious at first. Then I found something small. A notification email buried in an old backup folder from our shared Google account. Daniel had been looking up Ellison estate probate timelines 2 months before Mark died. 2 months. I stared at that screen longer than I care to admit. That's when the feeling shifted. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was structure, timing, planning. I shut my laptop and walked away from it like it could burn me. But sleep didn't come that night either. Instead, I started thinking about Mark's funeral again. About Rebecca crying so hard she couldn't speak. About Daniel standing a little too far away from me like he was already halfway out the door even then. 2 days later, something else happened. I got a text from an unknown number. "Don't trust the timeline. Check Memorial Health Hospital. Night shift records." No name, no signature. Just that. I stared at it for a long time, sitting on my couch in that quiet apartment traffic humming outside on the street below. I could have ignored it, deleted it, told myself it was nothing. But I didn't. Instead, I drove to Memorial Health the next morning. The hospital smelled like it always does, cleaning solution, coffee, and exhaustion. I sat in the records waiting area feeling like I didn't belong there, like I was about to ask questions I shouldn't be asking. When I finally got someone on the line, I kept it simple. I said I was a family friend helping settle paperwork for Mark Ellison's estate. The clerk hesitated but eventually agreed to pull limited access logs. It took almost an hour. When she came back, she didn't look at me directly. "That case had a few irregular entries," she said quietly. "What kind of irregular?" She flipped through the printout. Medication adjustments, late-night access to patient charts, and she paused a change in attending review right before time of death. My mouth went dry. Who made the changes? She hesitated again. One of the external consultants. A private advisory group. I can't release full names without legal request. But she slid one page forward. A consulting firm name? The same one I had seen circled on that funeral program in my kitchen. My hands started to feel numb. I thanked her and left before she could say anything else. Outside, the air felt too bright, too normal for what I had just heard. I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot for a long time without starting the engine. Because now I couldn't unsee it. Daniel wasn't just leaving me. He was connected to something I didn't understand yet. And Rebecca, My best friend was somewhere in the middle of it. And I had the sinking feeling that Mark's death wasn't just the end of a story. It might have been the beginning of one. I wish I could say I went home after the hospital and slept on it like a rational person. I didn't. I sat in my car in the Memorial Health parking lot for almost an hour, engine off, hands on the steering wheel, just staring at nothing. People walked past me with coffee cups and lunch trays like life was normal. Mine wasn't anymore. That night, I didn't go back to Daniel. I didn't even call him. I just stayed in my small apartment off Veterans Parkway, lights off, TV on, but not watched. And for the first time since the divorce papers hit my kitchen table, I stopped trying to make it make sense emotionally. I started treating it like a case. The next morning, I called in sick to work and went straight to the public library, downtown, old brick building, the kind that still has real newspapers and quiet corners where nobody bothers you. I pulled up obituary notices, probate filings, anything tied to Mark Ellison. That's when the pattern started showing itself. Mark's death had been listed as cardiac complications. Clean, simple, no autopsy details in the public summary. Just done. But the timeline didn't sit right. I wrote everything out on paper like my brain needed it physically in front of me to understand it. Mark hospitalized Tuesday night. Stable Wednesday morning. Sudden decline Wednesday evening. Declared dead early Thursday. Then I cross-checked something else. Insurance records. That took longer. Too long. But eventually, through publicly accessible filings and a few old contacts I still had from tax season work, I found mention of a life insurance policy tied to Mark's estate. $2.3 million. Payable to Rebecca, unless certain conditions changed. That was the first time my stomach actually turned. Because that wasn't just grief money. That was life-changing money in a town like Springfield. I sat back in the library chair and just stared at the ceiling for a second, trying to slow my thoughts down. Then I heard a voice behind me. "You're digging into Ellison, aren't you?" I turned around fast. It was an older woman, maybe late 60s, cardigan sweater, reading glasses hanging around her neck. She looked tired in the way hospital staff always look when they've seen too much. "I'm sorry," I said. She sat down across from me anyway, like she had already decided. "I used to work nights at Memorial Health," she said. "Nurse supervisor, retired now." Something in my chest tightened. "I'm not trying to cause trouble," I told her. She gave a short laugh. "Trouble already happened. You're just noticing it now." That's when I knew I wasn't imagining the pattern anymore. I lowered my voice. "Do you know what happened with Mark Ellison?" She hesitated. That long hospital-trained pause where people decide how much truth they're allowed to say out loud. Then she said, "There were pressures, unusual ones." "What kind of pressures?" She looked around the library like she was checking if truth itself was allowed in the room. "Outside influence on medication adjustments," she said carefully, "and someone requesting repeated access to patient charts that didn't belong to them." "Who?" I asked. She shook her head slightly. "I won't say names, but I will say this. The same consulting group kept showing up, even when they weren't supposed to be involved." My throat went dry. "The financial advisory firm." She nodded once. "The same name, again." It felt like everything I had been holding in my head finally snapped into alignment, but instead of clarity, it just made the picture darker. Before she stood up to leave, she added one more thing. "People don't usually die that neatly," she said. "Not unless someone benefits from it." Then she walked away like she hadn't just dropped a bomb into my life. That evening, I made a decision I didn't tell anyone about. I went to Mark's funeral home records again. I looked at every detail I could find. And that's when I noticed something I had missed before. Daniel's name wasn't just on a contact list. It appeared in a pre-arrangement consultation note. 2 weeks before Mark died. I leaned back in my chair and actually laughed once, but there was no humor in it. It was that moment where denial stops working, where your brain finally gives up trying to protect you. And suddenly everything with Daniel didn't feel like a breakup anymore. It felt like I had been removed from something already in motion. The engagement between Daniel and Rebecca wasn't random. It was fast, too fast, like it had been planned to move on a schedule. That night I got another message from the unknown number. "You saw the records, now look at who signed off on discharge." No name again, just pressure. I stared at it for a long time before replying. "Who are you?" No response. But I didn't need one anymore. Because I already knew I wasn't just dealing with betrayal between 3 people. I was standing at the edge of something organized. And I had a feeling the next layer wouldn't just hurt me. It would change what I thought I knew about all of them. After the library, I stopped pretending I could accidentally stumble into answers. This wasn't gossip anymore. It wasn't even just betrayal. It was something structured, timed, protected. So I did something I never thought I'd do in my life. I called a lawyer. Not Daniel's kind of lawyer, not corporate, not friendly. I called Thomas Reed. Everyone in Springfield knows that name. Probate estate disputes, messy inheritances. The kind of lawyer people only meet when their lives are already on fire. His office was in a small brick building near downtown, right above a dry cleaner. No marble lobby, no fancy reception. Just a woman at a desk who looked like she had seen every kind of family collapse imaginable. When I walked in, I didn't even sit down at first. I think my husband is involved in something around an estate case, I said. Thomas Reed didn't react. He just pointed at the chair. Start from the beginning, he said. So I did. Mark, the funeral, Daniel's divorce papers, Rebecca, the hospital records, the consulting firm. I didn't dramatize it, I didn't need to. The facts already sounded wrong when you put them in order. When I finished, he leaned back and tapped a pen against his desk. That consulting firm you mentioned, he said I've seen them around probate cases before. Not often, but enough to notice. That hit me harder than I expected. Is that normal, I asked? No, he said simply. He didn't promise me justice. He didn't say anything comforting. He just started asking questions. Dates, names, bank accounts, timing. And that's when I realized something important. This wasn't going to be fast, or clean, or safe emotionally. It was going to require proof. Real proof. Meanwhile, life outside my investigation kept moving like nothing was happening. Daniel and Rebecca were now fully public. Not hiding anything. Dinner photos, local charity event appearances. People in Springfield started treating them like some kind of new beginning story. That part stung more than I expected. Because people like simple narratives. And in theirs, I was already the past. One afternoon, I ran into a woman I used to go to yoga with at the grocery store. She smiled politely, then hesitated. I heard you and Daniel split up, she said. I nodded. Yeah. She lowered her voice. He seems happy with Rebecca. I just stood there holding a bag of apples, realizing how fast people rewrite your life when you're not watching. Good for him, I said, and walked away before she could say anything else. But inside, something hardened. Not anger, not even revenge yet. Something more focused. That week, Thomas called me back. I pulled some preliminary financial activity, he said. There are transfers tied to Daniel's consulting work that don't align with his job description. What kind of transfers, I asked. Advisory fees. Timing aligns too closely with changes in the estate timeline you described. I didn't even ask what that meant in full. I didn't need to yet. I just said, so it's connected. Yes, he said, but we still need the missing piece. That missing piece turned out to be testimony. And it came from someone I didn't expect. Carol Jensen, the retired nurse from Memorial Health, she finally agreed to meet Thomas in person. We met in a small diner outside Springfield, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that never tastes fresh, but somehow feels right. Carol looked nervous when she sat down. Not guilty, just tired. I shouldn't even be here, she said immediately. But you are, Thomas replied. She nodded slowly. There were changes that night, not medically justified ones. What kind of changes, I asked gently. She hesitated, then said it. Medication adjustments were signed off through an external recommendation, not hospital protocol. It bypassed standard review. My hands tightened around my coffee cup. Who approved it? Thomas asked. Carol looked down. Someone who wasn't supposed to have access, she said. But they did. She slid a folded paper across the table. A log sheet. And there it was again. The consulting firm. Same name, same pattern, same thread pulling through everything. When she left the diner, I stayed seated for a long time staring at that paper. Thomas broke the silence. This is enough to open a formal inquiry, he said. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt that strange drop in your stomach when you realize things are about to become real in a way you can't undo. That night, Daniel called me for the first time in weeks. I almost didn't answer. But I did. His voice was calm, too calm. You've been asking questions, he said. Not a question, a statement. I don't know what you're talking about, I replied. A pause. Then you should stop. You don't understand what you're stepping into. For a second, I almost believed he sounded concerned. Then I remembered the divorce papers on my kitchen table. I understand enough, I said. Another pause. Then his voice dropped slightly. You think you're doing something smart here, he said. You're not. And he hung up. I sat there holding my phone long after the screen went dark. Because that wasn't fear I felt anymore. It was confirmation. Everything I had uncovered was real. And Daniel knew I was close enough that he felt the need to warn me, or threaten me. Or both? The next morning, Thomas called again. "We're ready," he said. For what I asked. "For the gala," he replied. "That's where everything connects." I didn't ask for details. I already knew what was coming. And for the first time since that kitchen table moment, I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was preparing. The Springfield Country Club looks like a place where nothing bad should ever happen. Wide windows, white tablecloths, soft music that tries too hard to make everything feel harmless. That night it was packed for the annual charity gala. Business owners, local politicians, hospital donors, the same familiar faces you see at every community event in town. And right in the center of it all was Daniel, standing next to Rebecca like they belonged there, smiling like nothing in the world had ever gone wrong in his life. I stood outside for a full minute before going in, not because I was scared, because I knew once I walked through those doors, there was no going back to pretending any of this was just a messy divorce. Thomas Reed met me inside near the entrance. "You ready?" he asked. "No," I said honestly, "but I'm here." He nodded like that was enough. We didn't make a dramatic entrance. No music cue, no spotlight moment. We just walked in like everyone else. At first, no one noticed me. That's the thing about people who think your story is over, they stop looking for you. Daniel was halfway through a speech when I saw him. Something about new beginnings and community growth. People were politely smiling, wine glasses in hand. Rebecca stood beside him, nodding at the right moments. Practiced, controlled. I almost didn't recognize her. Not because she looked different. Because she looked like she had decided to become someone else entirely. Thomas gave me a small nod. That was the signal. He stepped forward first. "Excuse me," he said calmly, voice carrying just enough. "Before this continues, I need to address something regarding an estate matter tied to Mark Ellison." The room shifted instantly. You can feel it when a space changes. Conversations don't stop all at once, they fade like someone slowly turning down the volume on the world. Daniel paused mid-sentence. Rebecca's smile tightened. Thomas didn't rush. He never rushes. He opened a folder and started speaking. He didn't accuse. He didn't speculate. He just laid out facts. Dates, transfers, documentation. The consulting firm's involvement. Hospital record anomalies. Financial movements tied to Mark's estate timeline. I watched faces in the room change one by one. Confusion first, then discomfort, then realization. Someone whispered, "Wait, what?" Daniel stepped forward. "This is ridiculous," he said quickly. "This is a private misunderstanding." But Thomas kept going. And then came the part that changed everything. The timeline of Mr. Ellison's final hospitalization, Thomas said, does not align with standard medical progression, and there are documented external influences on treatment decisions. A murmur spread through the crowd. Rebecca finally spoke, her voice shaking now. "What are you saying?" she asked. Thomas looked directly at her. "I'm saying you need to understand what you were part of." That hit her harder than anything else, because for the first time she wasn't just a grieving widow or a new fiancé. She looked uncertain. And that's when I stepped forward. Not fast, not dramatic, just enough for people to see me clearly. The room went quiet in a way I will never forget. Daniel saw me and his expression changed instantly. Not surprise, recognition. Like he had been waiting for this moment and still didn't want it to happen. "You shouldn't be here," he said under his breath as I approached. "I think I should," I said. Rebecca looked between us. "Laura, what is this?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "I think you've been told a version of events that was very carefully managed," I said. Daniel stepped closer. "Stop talking." But Thomas raised his hand slightly. "Mr. Bennett," he said, "I'd advise you not to interfere." The room was completely still now. Even the staff had stopped moving. I looked at Rebecca. "I didn't come here to hurt you," I said quietly. "But you need to understand something. This wasn't just betrayal between people." Her eyes were glassy now. Then what was it? I hesitated. "Because this part mattered. It was built," I said, "step by step. And someone made sure it all happened in a very specific order." That's when Daniel lost control. "This is insane," he snapped. "You're twisting everything." But 2 security staff were already approaching, not aggressively, just professionally. Thomas had clearly arranged that part in advance. Daniel turned back to me, voice low. "You think you've won something here," he said. I looked at him for a long second. "No," I said, "I think I finally stopped losing." That was it. No applause, no dramatic music, just reality settling in. Rebecca covered her mouth as she realized piece by piece that the life she had stepped into was built on something she didn't fully understand. And Daniel, my husband, was escorted out of that room while everyone watched. Not as a winner, not as a man in control. Just someone whose version of the story had finally been exposed in public. Outside later, the air was cold and quiet. Thomas stood beside me as the building lights blurred behind the glass. "You okay?" he asked. I thought about it for a second. "No," I said honestly, "but I will be." And for the first time in a long time, I believed that. Not because everything was fixed, but because the truth was no longer hiding. It was out in the open where it couldn't be controlled anymore. A few days later, I got a message from Rebecca. Just one line. I didn't know. I didn't reply right away. I just looked at it for a long time. Then I finally wrote back. I know. And I meant it. Because in the end, that was the hardest part, not just what they did, but how easily everything fell apart once the truth stopped being buried. If you've ever been through something that made you question everything you thought was real, I hope you remember this. Silence protects the wrong people. Sometimes speaking up is the only way anything ever changes. Thank you for listening.